meeting of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Public Safety Subcommittee. Today, the subcommittee will review bills that require a Woodrum amendment in the budget. The Code of Virginia requires a deposit into the Corrections Special Reserve Fund when there is a potential increase in the number of prison beds needed. The Woodrum bills we will hear today each require a deposit of $50,000 from the general fund, the amount required for an indeterminate impact. I would like to remind members of the public that any testimony should be limited to the fiscal impact of the bill. These bills have already received public comment related to their policy changes in the Judiciary Committee. Also, senators presenting their bills in subcommittee do not need to present them again in the full committee meeting at 9 o'clock. This subcommittee will provide its recommendations to the full committee. After we review the bills, we will hear from Dr. Daniel Gade, Director of the Department of Veterans Services. He will briefly present on the governor's proposed budget amendments related to veterans. Dr. Gade will also provide an update of new investments adopted last session, totaling more than $12 million each year. Last session, Secretary Crenshaw presented to the subcommittee on his plan to develop performance measures for veteran services, and we look forward to hearing how they have been used to direct the new funding. Finally, staff will provide a brief overview of the governor's proposed budget amendments and a summary of amendments requests submitted by senators. Before we begin hearing the bill's patrons, I would ask to call the roll.
Senator Lucas?
Here.
Senator Norman?
I'm here.
Senator Ruff?
Here.
Senator Edwards?
Here.
Senator Peterson?
Here.
Senator Marsden?
Here.
And Senator Evans is coming back.
Yes. I will now hand it to the first patron to present their bill.
Senator Deeds?
Senator Deeds. Senate Bill 1382.
Came up in Senate Judiciary, and I think there's a substitute for it. It just takes out an unnecessary code provision. Is that right, Charles?
Madam Chair, that's correct. I have the substitute here.
Okay. Can we get an amendment on motion on the substitute?
So moved.
Been moved, probably seconded. The substitute be agreed to. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
The bill does 3 or 4 things. Number 1, it defines assault weapons in a manner consistent with the 1994 federal legislation. Number 2, it says that assault weapons that meet that definition, they're manufactured on or after the effective date of the legislation, are not legal to be possessed or sold in Virginia. Number 3, it says for the assault weapons that were manufactured before that date, they are they're not legal to be sold or possessed by people under the age of 21. The 4th thing it does is it ties into a voluntary buyback program for those guns that can be possessed. And the voluntary buyback program, I've got a budget amendment in for.
You heard testimony from the patron. Any questions of the patron? Hearing none. It's been moved and properly seconded that the bill be reported. All in favor of that motion, please designate yea or nay. Aye.
Aye.
Senator Deeds, you're done.
It's no's too, probably.
I didn't hear any.
I didn't answer. You didn't answer for any, but
No,
no.
I didn't answer.
Noes have the same right?
So I wouldn't go vote.
We're not counting those.
I'm getting very used to that.
Madam Chair,
Sorry.
I was also advised by my aide that Senate Bill 1289 was on your docket. Is that correct?
Not today.
No, today.
Okay,
No.
thank you.
Thank you, Senator Deeds. Have a good day.
And I'm going to record that as 5-2. Is that correct?
You report it however you want.
Intimidating. A lot of power.
Is that a no?
Next we'll go to Senator Evans. We'll get to other patrons.
Okay, Senate Bill 1181 has to do with ghost guns, unserialized parts. We're fixing a loophole manufacturer will price to show them their finished parts about an individual parts. They can be put together without any specialized skill and been used in some directed shootings or advertised as exquisite around prohibited purchasing restrictions. That's the gist of the bill. I think you've heard similar before. This is pretty straightforward.
You've heard from the patron of the bill. Any questions?
It's just a $50,000 impact.
That's correct.
Any further questions of the patron? It's been moved and properly seconded that the bill be reported. Please designate your preference by saying aye or nay.
Nay.
You got your 2 nays this time. The bill will be reported. Senator Eben, you have a second bill?
Yes, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 1182 has to do with open carry of assault-style weapons, and there is a carve-out on line 50 for people engaged in lawful hunting or recreational shooting activities in established shooting range or contests. It basically prohibits the open public carry of these weapons.
Any questions of the patron?
Madam Chair, I do have a very tiny technical amendment. On line 36, the Romanettes are misnumbered, so it's after, on line 36, after through, strike Romanet 6, insert Romanet 5.
Okay, you've heard that line amendment?
Line 36.
On the PDF. It's on the PDF version, Senator Marsden. So,
Okay, we still need a motion.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that the amendment be approved or adopted. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, same right.
7-0.
7-0.
Next, we'll go to Senator Boy Scouts.
Senator,
I'm so sorry.
Technical bill.
So sorry.
Senator Abbott?
I would move that we report SB 1192 unless there are any questions.
You've heard the motion from the patron. And second, all in favor of that motion, please designate aye or nay. Aye.
Nay.
You got, was that 1 nay?
2 nays.
2 nays. Okay.
Do you really think any of this is getting you through the House? You and I are too commonsensical.
The bill will be reported.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Abbott. Senator Boysko, looks like you're up next.
Madam Chair,
Good morning.
Madam Chair, I have Senate Bill 1139. It has a small fiscal impact, $50,000. In committee, we actually moved it from a Class 1 misdemeanor to a Class 4. This would require adults to store their firearms in times when they know that a child of the age of 18 or under or a prohibited person would be in the household.
And it does not apply to individuals lawfully carrying.
It does if they're in their home and they know that there's
they're
a
in their
child
home.
coming to their home, because we have seen a 129% increase in the death of children. It is now the #1 cause of death, more than traffic accidents, more than illness, and 40% of that increase is actually in suicide. This safe storage bill
Applies.
would apply to all households.
Gotcha.
That no,
Senator
So it does
Peterson?
not apply to individuals lawfully carrying a firearm on their person.
right, if they have it on their person,
On
if
their
they
person.
have it on their body, they are fine. As soon as they part with the firearm, they need to store it in a locked container.
Thank you. You heard the explanation from the patron? Senator Norman?
Why are we criminalizing, forcing dealers to post a written notice? Where else is that required?
Madam Chair, Senator
Boy Scout?
Marmot, child death, #1
Don't
cause.
get to the emotional aspect.
I'm telling
I
you-
want to know why you're requiring a dealer to post a notice, and give me an example where else that is required.
Cigarettes. You must be 21 or older to buy a cigarette. Posted in every single convenience store in the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. She had her Wheaties this morning.
Holiday Inn Express last night.
Any further questions from the patron?
Second.
It's been moved and second that the bill be reported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. 5-2.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the
Welcome.
committee. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. You do the
See
same.
you later.
Thank you. We have 2 other bills, but where are the patrons?
Not here yet. Burnett, we're going to call him. I would recommend we go ahead with Commissioner Gade's presentation.
Yes. Please join us, Commissioner. Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Ma'am, good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good morning.
Can I do this? Do I do this, or do we
I
have
got it.
hard copies in front of you?
I think we have hard copies.
I'll just, sorry, if you, Madam Chair, I'll just go ahead and brief off the hard copies.
Okay, that'll be fine, thank you.
Great. Don't worry about it. We got it.
Oh, she's has it. Okay, there it is.
Okay.
I can click as you go.
Okay, that's perfect. Hey, good morning, Senators. I really appreciate the chance to be here this morning.
Might want to move the mic.
Thank you.
Reel it in. Thought I was supposed to sit down here. One of the things I enjoy most about my job is the fact that despite all the hustle and bustle of politics, that my agency is largely immune from that because both sides of the aisle support the mission of the agency. And so that's been a real pleasure over the last year as commissioner. So I want to give you a quick update on, and we can go as quick or as slow as you want, but I've been asked to give you an update on a number of budget items, as well as how we're measuring our progress on key goals. Major 2023 initiatives are all framed around the governor's, one of his campaign phrases that he continually used was making Virginia the best place for people to live, work, and raise a family. And the way we operationalize that inside the Department of Veteran Services is three pillars. What we say is that we want veterans to stay in Virginia, we want veterans to work in Virginia, and we want veterans and their families to thrive in Virginia. So our strategic messaging for the next year is around this stay, work, thrive. And we use something called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, to measure our progress on those initiatives. And I can go deeply into the OKRs. Those are not provided in your slides, but I have slides that do show those charts and so forth. If you'd like those, I can submit those to you. Operating initiatives for the next year, you'll see up here. The Gold Standard Digital Hub pilot is scheduled to go live on March 10th. The first service line in the chute for the Gold Standard Digital Hub is going to be Virginia Veterans and Family Support, so primarily suicide prevention, homelessness, high need wraparound services, and the vendor that we've selected through a competitive process for that is a company called Unite Us, which already has a well-established presence in Virginia. We're very excited about the Digital Hub. We are in the process. One of the things that was shocking to me, actually, when I took this job was that we have, at the moment, no clear picture of who our veterans are, where they are, how many they are, or what they need. And that's largely due to the fact that Big VA does not share data with states. They are very stingy with their data. They hide behind Privacy Act and a bunch of other things. So it's not a Virginia problem. It's a 50 states plus territories problem. And the way we're getting around that is we're actually purchasing veteran data from TransUnion. So you're going to see much more targeted outreach from us based on this data initiatives piece that you see up here on the slide. I think the most important program inside of DVS is V3, Virginia Values Veterans. And more largely, or more broadly, I think that the number one thing that we do is employment. You know, the best welfare program is a job. The best suicide prevention program actually is productive, meaningful employment. And so workforce initiatives are key to what we're doing in the agency. Next is the impact of the PACT Act. So the PACT Act, which is tough to say quickly. The PACT Act is the toxic exposures bill that was passed 5 or 6 months ago at the federal level, and it essentially makes the Big VA estimates that our claims volume will double based on PACT Act eligibility, because a lot of veterans who had not previously been eligible for disability benefits are now going to be eligible. So in response to that, you'll see later in the presentation that we've expanded the number of veterans service representatives that we have in the field and we're alert to the need potentially to have more of those folks. But we're going to have to see what the demand signal is and then respond to that demand signal, and we'll be in close contact with the relevant committees.
Senator Edwards?
How many veteran service agents do you have now, and how many do you want to expand to?
Yeah, sir. So our total on hand, or our authorized quality or quantity, our MEL is around 70, depending on how you count appeals attorneys and things like that. In this slide deck, you'll see that we're adding 12. The Youngkin Amendment, the 470H money allowed us to add 12 more. And we're also looking at our processes to make the existing workforce more efficient. So not throwing more bodies at the problem, but also working on efficiencies and partnerships with other organizations to better handle the claims volume that we're anticipating. And we're actually seeing the leading edge of that anticipated spike in claims. One of the things I'm really pleased about is that our 35th and 36th offices field offices are going to be opening up soon. And the beauty of this, and the reason you haven't been asked for any money, is because both of these offices are free. One is going to be given to us, space is going to be given to us by Fort Eustis, and the other one in Arlington is VFW or American Legion, I don't remember. Yeah, in the new American Legion office in Arlington, and they're giving us a really beautiful space there.
Nice.
So you'll see those offices come online here shortly. And then the Suicide Prevention Opioid Addiction Services program, the first round of funding we're expecting to go out starting in May, and we're in the process of designing the program by which that money will be granted out the door.
Okay.
So now, turning to individual budget items, the introduced budget has $900,000 to incentivize to expand the V3 grant program. Like I said before, I think the V3 is the most important thing the agency does, frankly. And currently, in previous years, this was $100,000. And it was for employers. Employers could apply to get a $1,000 grant per veteran hired, based on the way the previous system was. But the feedback we got from our V3 partners or companies or employers was that in a lot of cases the $1,000 wasn't worth going after, and so we've asked in this budget amendment for that to be expanded to $5,000 per hire, and so that's a larger amount of money there. The V3 certified companies at the beginning of calendar year 2022, there were 1,610 V3 certified companies, and now as of last quarter, there were almost 2,400. And the goal, my goal for the agency is by the end of 2025 that we'll have 6,000 companies enrolled in the V3 program. So that would be a major boost to V3 and how that is working. The next budget item on here, there we go. All right. So Hire Vets Now and SkillBridge. SkillBridge, just super briefly, is a federal program by which employers can get the people who are still technically on active duty but close to retirement or close to separation. They can work for the company but paid by Department of Defense for a period of time up to, I think it's up to 6 months. It varies a little bit based on some technical items. But the beauty of SkillBridge is that employers get to try out that veteran and see if they want to hire him or her, and the employer gets to try out, or the employee gets to try out that company and see if they want to sign on. SkillBridge is an absolutely awesome program, and so this money here allows us to hire one FTE additional inside of the V3 business line of DVS to focus on SkillBridge and to expand internships, apprenticeships, et cetera. Next, you see on here, yeah, okay, it's up here. 5 FTEs additional to handle the expanded number of claims that we're anticipating for the PACT Act. As you can imagine, well, as you probably know, these employees are, if you hire somebody off the street, It takes about 6 months. It's a technical job that they're doing, so it takes about 6 months before they're fully mission capable. And even then, they're a little bit probationary for a while in terms of their skill sets. And so from the time we start spending money and hiring people until those people are contributing to the workload of the agency is 6 or 8 months. And so you'll see that these people will come online if this money is given to the agency. These people will come online about 6 months after the bill becomes in effect. So that's that one. The spouse and guard and reserve burial fees. I'm proud to say that Virginia was the first state in the union to bury a guardsman under the new law. And actually, the new law didn't even become effective until like July 1st of 2022. But the veteran in question died in April, and we just went ahead and buried him because it was the right thing to do, and because the law had been passed but wasn't yet effective, and it was something easy for us to do to honor that veteran. What this does is honors the legacy of these families by allowing us to eliminate spouse burial fees.
Okay.
Up until now, we had charged, was it 400 per? 400. Right. So 400 per spouse, and now with this money we'll be able to eliminate that. We think that we're going to have it'll be a maximum of 1,000 spouses a year in our estimation, but we'll see how spouses respond to the elimination of that burial fee, and of course the guard and reserve piece. We're still working through that.
Okay.
We do have, and this is on my slides, not on yours, but we do have some anticipated, I'll say, turbulence in the future with our cemeteries, based on the fact that we're going to run out of columbarium space at 2 of our cemeteries, and those will be out of columbarium space for about a year while new columbaria are constructed. And what that means is that those burials will have to be either deferred, or we'll send that veteran someplace else. So we're going to see a drop in revenue because we won't be able to get the VA plot allowance from Big VA until we actually inter that veteran in the niches. So while the niches are being constructed, we'll see a decline in our revenue, and we're alert to the need to shift some money around inside the agency to maintain the shrine standards of the 3 cemeteries.
Okay.
The next on here is just this one, very simple, working capital advance for Jones and Cabocoy and Puller Care Centers. Senators, if you have not been to one of these care centers, I would love to have you come. I would love to have you see how awesome these facilities are. They're really beautiful. The Jones and Cabocoy one is very, very close, within 45 or 60 days, depending on some things out of our control, to having our first resident in-house. And then the Puller Care Center is about 2 months behind the Jones and Cabocoy Center. So we're anticipating opening both of those in November. But in the meantime, all 4 care centers are going to be rebuilding census after COVID. Care centers broadly around the country took a big, huge hit during COVID, and we're rebuilding our census at those. And so what this working capital advance is going to allow us to do is do all the hiring and creating of capacity while there is no revenue there yet, because of course, you know, we get paid by the resident, and so those residents won't be there yet, but we have to hire staff and so forth, and so that's what this working capital advance will do for us. And then there are a couple of capital projects on this slide. The Sitter and Barfoot Care Center here in Richmond, which, by the way, last year was voted the #1 nursing home in Virginia, which is pretty exciting. But the Sitter and Barfoot Care Center does need some renovations, and so this is life, health, and safety stuff, fire alarms, and so forth. And then the state matching fund commitment is necessary to trigger federal spending on modernizing those care centers. So, of course, the care centers are a partnership between the state and the federal government, and so the federal grant spending is triggered by a commitment by the state to match the match that funds.
Madam
So
Chair, Madam Chair,
Senator Edwards, I think we were about to ask the same question, but go ahead.
yeah, the replacement facility in Roanoke, which is between Roanoke and Salem, actually, Virginia Veterans Care Center, what's happening there?
So, sir, that care center is an aging facility. And so what we're trying to do here, Steve, maybe you can jump in here. I'm going to ask my deputy commissioner to step forward if that's
Sure.
fine with you.
Please join us.
Madam Chair, Mr.
Please join us.
Steve?
The Virginia Veterans Care Center is a state-of-the-art 1980s design. And
State-of-the-art 1980s design.
it's
State-of-the-art.
1980s design.
That's-
It opened in 1992, and in comparison
That's
to
what we
nursing-
got here.
Yeah, that's right. In comparison to nursing home today, it's a beautiful facility, lovingly maintained, fantastic staff. But if you can imagine, double occupancy rooms, Jack and Jill bathrooms, where two rooms or 4 residents sharing 1 bath, compared to
State of the
considering
art.
Barfoot and the 2 new ones, which are single occupancy private baths. They're organized around, instead of long hallways, the new ones are organized around the household design. So what the plan is here, Senator, is to build a new Virginia Veterans Care Center in Roanoke that would bring it up to 2020 design standards and would deliver the care that's really expected today.
Well, Madam Chair, would, you can tear the old one down, or how's it going to work?
No, it's, what we're looking at, Madam Chair, Senator,
Yes.
is building a new one next door, and then the old one would be available for repurpose or could be sold by the Commonwealth or be used by for other purposes. But the idea is the new one goes up, you have 200 residents in the old one, 100, actually the new one's about 192. It opens, you stand it up, and then over the course of about a week, you move every resident, you move every staff over, and then the old building is available for repurpose.
But this spending signals a commitment by the Commonwealth that is then matched by the federal government in terms of design and planning and so forth. But this is a
5 to 10 year project.
8-year project.
Okay, my question was not the same as Senator Edwards, as it turns out. No, the 244,000, that's going to be part of the federal grant? And the general fund portion? Explain that to me.
Go ahead, Steve.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
The 244,000 in general fund is that state commitment to match the expected federal grant of 554,000. So it's all of these care center projects, be they new construction or renovation projects, they require the state to commit at least 35%.
Okay.
And the feds will commit a maximum of 65%.
Okay, that was the proportion I was listening for.
Yes, ma'am. And we have to, and the Fed rules say our money has to be in the bank before they'll release theirs.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can stay with us.
Next slide is just a sort of overview of where everything is. I'm sure you're all very aware of at least the ones in your own districts, but would encourage you to, to go see the care centers and sort of experience how amazing the new ones are. And subject to your questions, ma'am or gentlemen.
Members of the committee, any questions?
Pretty good.
I think you've been very clear.
Great, thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much for your presentation.
And as a side note, Department of Veteran Services would be thrilled to participate in any veteran town halls in your districts if you'd like to.
Sure.
Just shoot me an email and we'll help you set it up and advertise the services that Virginia provides to your constituents.
Madam Chair, I do have a
Senator
question.
Edwards?
The matching fund, say for Roanoke, how much is that going to be for 2024? It doesn't have a figure.
Madam
It's
Chair,
got a matching fund commitment.
the state funding commitment is going to be somewhere around $58 million to match around $100 million in federal funding.
Thank you.
And the way that the funding is done is, the good news is the state does not have to put the money down now. What you would authorize would be a treasury loan when the federal funds hits, and can be replaced by bond funding. So you're not tying down any money that can be used for other capital projects. project.
Okay.
I do have a,
Senator Peterson?
I have 3 American Legions and 1 VFW post in my Senate district, and they're struggling. And I don't know if you work with them at all, try and bring in new members, try and help them find new roles in the community. It's been really a task for a decade. We've tried to get more charitable games. That's been uneven. Do you work with that at all?
Yes, sir. So-
Okay, can you speak to that then?
Yes, sir, absolutely. One of the things that I'm very focused on as commissioner, and I think the agency has really kind of adopted this as a operating mode, is sort of I'll use kind of a special forces model. So famously, special forces, you sort of parachute 12 guys behind enemy lines, and they make a bunch of friends, and now they're punching with the weight of 500 instead of just the 12 guys with rifles, right? DVS is very small, including care centers, including the new care centers, which aren't even fully staffed yet. I'll have a total team of 1,200 or so people. There are 700,000 veterans in Virginia. And so what we need to do is expand our reach by partnerships. And so I've hired a director of research, outreach, and partnerships. He's at the GAMVIC meeting right now. And we have MOUs signed with American Legion. We have MOUs signed with VFW, and are begging American Legion and VFW to tell us how they want us to help. We will, whatever they want, we'll give to them, including stationing our VSRs at their locations from time to time so we can handle claims in their location, including outreach, including doing events at their facilities and things like that. Historically, those nonprofits and disabled American veterans is actually a little worse than those in terms of their willingness to, I think they've been burned by government in the past, essentially, both state and federal. And so there's some sort of pride of authorship, I'll say, when they take care of veterans, they want to do it to the exclusion of everybody else. And so when I say I'm here from the Commonwealth and I'm here to help, they sometimes view that with a little bit of trepidation. But we are committed to those partnerships. I'd be thrilled to help however I can. I just need to know what they want.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Director Gabe, both of you. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's been very helpful. And
Sir.
I know some of us will be calling on you to give presentations in our localities.
I would love to.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Returning to the agenda, Senator Madhu, you're up.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, this is pretty straightforward. This is in reference to catalytic converters, and I think, Madam Chairman, you know about some of the challenges
I
we've
do
been
indeed. I've
experiencing.
had about a dozen of them stolen.
Last year, we tried to deal with it. We made some really positive steps in that direction, but what has happened is people are creative. And one of the things that is occurring is our statute is based on everything happening in Virginia. We have some people in central Virginia who are advertising to purchase the catalytic converters, have prices ranging from $1,750 up to almost $3,000 that they will pay for it. They put them in a box van and they drive them to Maryland and sell them. And by doing that, then they don't have to go through the registration processes we have in Virginia, and they avoid the statute and continue to feed the cottage criminal industry of people stealing catalytic converters. It is very, very lucrative for individuals to do that. So this puts in place, in essence, we'd be able to stop that process with this change. And Charles worked with this for a number of months. I had a church reach out to me that had a multitude of vehicles. They lost $10,000 one night with the theft of the catalytic converters. So we're really just trying to stop what's happening now is individuals purchasing them in Virginia, selling them in other states, and avoiding the requirement to take information on who sold them the catalytic converters.
That's very helpful because, as you know, the victims do not get any restitution.
And if you can walk out of your house and not be able to drive your car.
That's correct.
And that's, at least if you're a business, you might have some other options, but some people wake up in the morning, go outside, and find that they can't move their vehicle, and then you can't get the replacement part because they're in such high demand.
That's correct. Any questions of the patron that I haven't already asked previously?
Move to report.
It's been moved and properly second that the bill be reported. All in favor of that motion designate by saying aye or nay. Aye.
Passes on a vote of 7-0.
Yes, 7-0. The bill is reported.
Thank you,
so
Madam
much.
Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you so much for carrying that bill.
Will you take this up in block in full? Okay, perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My other bill will not be as fortunate in financing.
Most of these bills won't be reported when they get to the house.
Yeah.
And did Senator Pete get a call?
He is going to come to full committee and present his bill, so I think we can just do my presentation. And then
Yes, that's great, because we missed that last week. Thank you so much.
I might go ahead and start, and I might ask our fellow Anya to maybe try to rotate my thing, but if you all could work from your paper copy while we work that out. So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'm just going to briefly run through the budget items. I'll do an overview of the governor's budget amendments, and then we'll go really briefly through the member amendments.
Thank you.
I think the goal is I'm going to hit them at a high level, but if there's anything you want me to do more work on or more due diligence or questions, then I can do that between now and when we meet next week to talk about the budget.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
So moving to slide 2, just a brief overview. There was $415 million general fund over Chapter 552 that was provided in last year's budget. And this year, the governor is proposing amendments that will result in an increase of $107 million general fund. And I'll just move straight to slide 3. So last week, we heard from the Department of Criminal Justice Services on their Operation Bull Blue Line. So I won't go into too much detail there, but that's the $30 million for law enforcement recruitment and training. We also heard about the increase in Operation Ceasefire grants, $20 million. And again, we're on, so if you turn, I should have, just to make sure, we're on tab 3 is my presentation, and then we're on slide 3.
On slide 3, okay. We're there.
Okay, great. So the second line item is the Operation Ceasefire grants. You'll remember that last year the subcommittee enacted 2 grants for firearm violence prevention. One is the Firearm Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant. One is Operation Ceasefire. So essentially, the department has awarded $5 million of these grants. They received about $10 million in applications, so $5 million in applications weren't able to be granted. They're asking for $20 million to do additional of these Operation Ceasefire grants. So this next item we also talked about last week, it's the Mass Violence Care Fund. I'll obviously let Senator Peterson jump in with his amendment, but essentially in the governor's budget, there's not a lot of language directing the funds, but the idea, do you want to go?
I have a budget amendment in on
Exactly.
that. There was sort of better language in there. The idea was that we would invest and it would be a revolving fund and then the interest would be available to families, for example, the Chesapeake situation, so that they can have costs that are not covered by insurance.
Thank you for doing that, Senator Peterson.
You're welcome. So.
And I think 2 considerations, just to kind of preview for next week that we're looking at is, one idea is to invest in the Virginia retirement system. They have they play the money market. I think they have about a 6% return rate in the long run, so that's one approach. The only kind of consideration that staff have been talking about is they have more of a long-term approach, whereas Treasury is about 2%, so lower return but less volatile. So if you look at their return rate, sometimes it's negative 20. So just different pros and cons.
About 529.
I've been meaning to ask Mike, because VRS doesn't do 529, so I need to ask him how exactly 529 works compared to those VRS trust
Senator
funds.
Peterson?
I'm sorry. Madam Chair, if we can follow up with my office, because I've got one of my staff people just tasked on that, so.
I met with Joe and Tanya yesterday, kind of talk these through. So we'll have a one-pager that kind of talks through those considerations next week. And I think the other thing that we kind of talked about with Joe is a one-pager to compare this to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund. Currently there's a $35,000 cap on the Virginia Victims Fund.
Yes.
That would not be the case with this.
Okay.
This would also be a little bit of expanded eligibility. So, for example, under the Virginia Victims Fund, currently, if I'm a family member, to receive money, the victim has to be deceased. Whereas for this, there would be a broader list. And then I think the other thing, just for your consideration, and again, I'll have a one-pager next week, is that kind of how do you define a mass violence event? And so Senator Peterson's constituent has pulled some language that they use for the Office of Victims Services up at the federal level. It probably ultimately, and you can jump in if this is incorrect, but it would probably ultimately be at the discretion of the director and the governor, but it would have some guardrails that would be pulled from that OVC, that federal language.
Senator Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This will mirror the Virginia Tech Fund, and Joe Samaha was the leader of the parents that put together the Virginia Tech Fund.
Okay.
15 years ago.
Okay, sounds great. So you have some expertise there.
Yep.
So I'll kind of skip through these next items on the slide, or I'll read them briefly if you have any questions. But we heard from the agencies last week. So we have the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Forces. This is to restore them to their fiscal year 19 level of revenue amidst declining court fee revenue. VETA transformation of the Department of State Police, new sworn and civilian positions. I believe it's about 45 funded and some additional technical adjustments and non-general fund positions. State police sworn salary compression, just a little bit on this. So the impetus for this is that, as you all know, last year for individuals that received targeted compensation, they only received 2.5, where other state employees received the 5%. So it wouldn't provide the full 2.5 catch-up, but it would get them kind of halfway there in terms for those folks that didn't get the full 5. State police talked about replacing their Virginia Crime Information Network servers. The Organized Retail Crime Task Force, this is more them in a supporting role to an Office of the Attorney General proposal. They talked about replacing the helicopters. And then the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, so they currently have a disaster logistics warehouse that they stood up at the beginning of COVID. They had never really had that before. They're asking to keep that capability. The administration has proposed this as one-time funding while they look for other options to maybe do it in a more cost-effective way, like co-locating at other state agencies or things like that.
Okay.
Moving to slide 4. So for the Department of Corrections, essentially what this is, so it's salary increases for vacant positions. So when the General Assembly provided the salary increases last year, they did it based on the filled position level. They're asking for it for the vacant positions. They do not have a higher level of filled positions than they did. So if they were to kind of stay at what they have now, this is money that would most likely they would use it for recruitment bonuses, overtime, things like that, unless they were able to fill the positions at a faster level. Another thing, just to quick remind, is that last year the Senate would have increased correctional officer salaries to $44,000, but in the conference report it was moved down to $42,000 to be in line with the sheriffs.
Okay.
Moving to the second line, Department of Corrections continue Lawrenceville Correctional Center contract. This is half of it is for the inflationary adjustment, which is baked into the contract, and then the other half is some funding that DOC has been absorbing up till now, so it would essentially have us fully funding the contract. So for the next one, 24-hour medical coverage, there was an incident at Brunswick Correctional Center, and the OAG recommended having RN at all of the DOC correctional facilities. So 7 of them currently, they have LPN, but they don't have RN. RN can't do the full diagnostic and provide services. So this would have full medical coverage at all DOC facilities. The next line item, backfilling the drug offender assessment and treatment fund. The administration has also proposed this as one-time funding. This is covering the same things that it was covering before, but also declining court fee revenue, and so this is us backfilling that with general fund.
Okay.
The next line item, Woodrum impact. The governor's bill assumes 11 bills, so we'll just be tracking those as they go through and adjusting this for whatever this subcommittee passes. The next item, renovate Franklin County Jail. This is pretty standard. It's only $34,000 that we provide the state share for this type of thing. Goes to the Board of Local and Regional Jails. So these next 2 Department of Juvenile Justice items, I'll just take a little bit of time to explain. So in November, the Department of Juvenile Justice adopted to increase the average length of stay guidelines. So as you'll remember, I believe it was 2015 or 2017, they decreased the average length of stay guidelines. DJJ board voted to reverse that, has not yet been implemented. It would be implemented around July. But kind of the issue here is that would result in roughly an extra 100 kids, average daily population increasing each year. and they just really don't have the capacity. So, for example, right now their capacity at the Bon Air Juvenile Justice Center is 216. If they were fully staffed, it would be 257. So they don't have the physical capacity and they don't have the staff.
Okay.
So basically what they're proposing is, and I guess the other kind of background on this is, we have approved a capital project for them to expand Bon Air. So as you'll remember, the original idea was to have 2 smaller juvenile correctional centers at the state level. DJJ had a lot of trouble finding a second location. So the General Assembly has previously approved a capital project to essentially expand Bon Air, but do so in kind of a trauma-informed way, have a different model that's less of an incarcerated environment. That has been approved and is moving forward. This is a little different, where in the interim, while they're trying to actually implement that new capital project, they would essentially clean out old dorms that they're not currently using. It's about 80 or 90 beds that they're looking to do to increase capacity at Bon Air. That's kind of piece one. And then the second piece is that they're looking to lease space at juvenile detention centers. They have not really, I would say it's not really fleshed out. They haven't, they're in the process of meeting with juvenile detention centers, but it's not clear exactly how it would work, because they're proposing to hire additional staff to run space in the local juvenile detention centers. And so there's just a lot of, I guess, operational things to look at there.
Yeah, this is something.
Senator Marsden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something we've been looking at, for a time now, because of the dramatic decreases in the number of kids in juvenile detention, which is, sort of operates like a local jail. Kids are there for periods of time. Usually the average stays in the around 26 days, that kind of thing. It's not corrections. My understanding was that they were going to try to purchase 3 detention homes for fully correctional operations, as opposed to the CPP programs, where they have a unit in a number of these facilities with corrections kids in there. These are long-term kids. Is that still the notion that you have, is that they're going to try to take over 3 different separate facilities for this purpose?
So I know the initial idea was actually that it would be a wing, so that they would lease space, so that the juvenile detention center would still operate out of the local, they would still do their part of it, and then Bon Air would come in and lease and operate a wing. That was the initial idea, but it is, it could have evolved in recent weeks, but as introduced, that was how it was proposed.
And I guess not the purpose today to discuss why they're increasing lengths of stay. They are having tremendous difficulty with recidivism. It's about 74%, both in the CPP programs, which are the local programs that house corrections kids. That was supposed to be a best practice. It just hasn't worked out. And the same for Bon Air. They're around 73% recidivism rate for kids in Bon Air. So I'd like to, at some point in time, figure out, what their other plans are to change the treatment modalities or whatever to try to improve that. I don't think just increasing the length of stay is going to accomplish much.
Thank you. Katie?
Just 3 more items on this slide, and I'll go quickly. Fire inspections. This is a mixture of them trying to do additional fire inspections beyond what they're mandated to do in the code, and also they have some declining revenue sources. Department of Forensic Science, these are just kind of some basic operating cost increases, except for the THC edible lab specialist, which is tied to legislation around Delta-8 and other THC isomers. And then I'll skip Community Attorney Services Council. That's just a data file program. This transfer flood control study funding. So we used to have the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security partner with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to do some stuff around flood control. That's no longer happening, so they're proposing to transfer it to the Secretary of Natural Resources for them to do some other flood resilience type work.
Okay.
Moving on to slide 5. I will not cover these because we just had these covered by the agency, unless there's any questions on the veterans amendments.
That's fine, thank you.
And then I think the only thing I'll highlight on slide 5 is to remove the local match for body-worn camera grant program. So that's the last item. As you'll remember, a couple years ago, the General Assembly provided $6 million for body-worn camera grants.
Right.
They've only been able to spend about $1.5 million of it, and so they're proposing to eliminate the local match because that's been the holdup.
Thank you.
Moving on to page 1 of the member request amendment. So again, I'm going to go through these really quickly, but we can pause if there's questions. So the first is from Senator Marsden, Juvenile Detention Center Efficiency Study. I believe we talked about this at the subcommittee in December when Deputy Secretary Cleary presented.
Yes.
Senator Favola, standardized prison visitor dress code, just to ensure that the department is being standard with what they're implementing with visitors coming in. Senator Favola, pre-release SNAP enrollment. You can already enroll in SNAP once you leave, but the department needs some positions to enroll people sooner. Senator Boysko has a few compensation-related Department of Corrections amendments. She also has an amendment to increase the food budget. So this was included in a study done by some advocates this past fall. The goal essentially is to reduce the burden, or the idea is that you would reduce the burden on the commissary by improving the food. So this would be money for them to have additional food available.
Okay.
Senator Peterson, this is also a partner to Senator Boysko's bill eliminating fees for inmates for communication as well as the commissary commission.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that bill coming before you in the committee shortly. Skipping to line 9, so this is a trauma-informed care for child trafficking survivors task force from Senator Favola. Line 10 is also from Senator Favola, domestic violence hotline. This is to backfill. They lost some grant funding, and so this is to backfill to continue their current operations. Senator Favola, this was adopted yesterday, the opioid use reduction and jail-based substance use disorder treatment and transition fund. She's asking for 2 in the first year, 5 in the second year. We're also going to look and see if opioid abatement funds can be used for this purpose. Next, line 12, Hanger Regional Criminal Justice Training Academies. Senator Bell, Framework for Addiction Analysis and Community Transformation. He presented on this last week, but it's essentially data analysis to allow more data-driven efforts related to the opioid crisis. Line 408, Victim Witness Grant Program. This relates to the declining fee revenue that we heard about last week. The governor's budget has some non-general fund that could be used towards this, but the non-general fund is only available if it's available. It depends on fee revenue. So this would be general fund to shore up those victim witness grant programs.
Sure.
Line 15, hospital-based sexual and domestic violence response grants. This is to VHA, similar to what they do with gun violence intervention, but this is for victims of sexual and domestic violence. Line 16, Senator Deeds, pretrial services in the 25th Judicial District. Line 17, Senator Deeds, School Division Emergency Communication Grants. This is essentially helps with incident response, technology to help with incident response, and you can also use it for some anti-bullying things. Line 19, Impact First Responders Pilot Program Intervention, Senator Newman. Line 20, Senator Deeds, Firearm Buyback Program. Line 22, this has to do with public safety and workforce development from Senator Lewis. Senator Mason, Virginia Law Enforcement Assistance Program pays for tuition, other things like that, ancillary costs for law enforcement. Line 25, Domestic Violence Services. We talked about Mass Care Violence Fund, the Victim Witness Grant. I'm going to skip to line 29, Senator Edwards, aid to localities with police departments.
That's the $599 he would ask about earlier.
And I'll do some estimates for next week for you all to look at. I believe if we use the same approach we used last year to go with essentially updating it for the economic outlook, but last year we basically did the growth, but we didn't include the tax proposals.
Okay.
If you did that again, I believe it would be about $2 million additional in -- but there's kind of different things you could look at. So I'll provide some numbers next week to look at. Moving to page 2. Senator Deeds, Cancer Prevention Early Detection. These are grants to localities. Line 33, Pulaski County First Responders. Line 33, this is a Crime Commission recommendation that a lot of you are aware of about drug testing for DUI and decedent drivers. Mm-hmm. Line 34, these are Delinquency Prevention and Youth Development Act grants. This came in last year from Senator McClellan. This basically funds localities to its nonprofits, faith-based, law enforcement, and they come up with a plan to ensure that youth services, especially for individuals who are at risk of being in the juvenile justice system, are available in the community. Line 36, this is also a recommendation of the Crime Commission, impaired driving enforcement training. Line 37, Senator Surville, this is about $50 million, just because you'd have to update multiple aspects of their technology, but this is to fully fund body-worn cameras for the state police. Line 38, 39, and 39 both have to do with initiatives for veterans' health. Line 40 and 41, one of these is Senator Ruff's, the Fort Lee Museum Enclave. And unless you all would like me to go through them, I separated out the ones that deal with legislation because you'll be seeing bill summaries on the remainder of these. So thank you for your patience as I went through all those. And obviously happy to answer any questions or have anything ready for next week.
Any questions? You've been thorough.
Thank you.
Thank you for getting my screen straight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there being no further business, committee will rise.